Welcome to Network Africa. Coming up on the program, the Niger Delta Avengers are ready to engage in dialogue with the Nigerian government, but insist on independent mediators. Then TikTok goes the clock for the EgyptAir black boxes as investigators say they will stop emitting signals by the 24th of this month. And later, the father of the late River Steenkamp calls for Oscar Pistorius to pay for his crime as he delivers an emotional speech in court. Welcome to Network Africa. I am Bisti Adebayo. We begin with news from the Niger Delta region. Barely a day after it rejected calls from former militants to open talks with the federal government, the new militant group, the Niger Delta Avengers, has made a U-turn. In a statement posted on its website, the group says it's ready to engage the federal government in a dialogue, provided there are grounds for such talks. One of the conditions it has given is for the federal government to get the home states of the multinational oil corporations operating in the region to commit independent mediators to this proposed dialogue. However, the group restates its resolve to continue to launch attacks on the facilities of the international oil companies that ferry crude from the Niger Delta. Well, joining us on the program is security expert and British Army Reserve Officer Chidi Nwonu. Chidi, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, Chidi, the Niger Delta Avengers have agreed to dialogue with the federal government. Why do you think the group has changed its mind?
It's an interesting dynamic that we've seen, panning out in the Delta. But I mean, the key thing is that what we can take away is that the attacks and the existence of the Niger Delta Avengers has always been what I would describe as a negotiating tactic. The demands are very, very curious for what we would expect to see from a militant group from that region. And the normal demands have been, around resource control, environmental degradation, and things like this. But the demands of the NDA have been very specific in terms of certain cases, such as, the Colonel Dasuki case, issues with former Bayelsa government, Alamesia, the late Alamesia, issues with Rotimi Amechi, one of the federal ministers. So they've been very specific around certain political issues as opposed to the general, issues of the Niger Delta of, environmental issues and resource control. So it would almost, and also their attacks have been very clinical. They've specifically and, repeatedly said they will not take lives, they'll just damage the infrastructure. And they've been very professional, very clinical. So the way I look at this is that all these attacks have been a negotiating tactic, a way to open up the space with the federal government. And this is what has happened. They have dictated their terms, and it's now been thrown out there for the federal government to, either take it up or not.
Now, talking about taking it up or not, you've mentioned some of their demands. Now, do you think governments will actually meet these demands?
Well, the devil is in the detail of how we actually look at their demands, because they've asked for international mediators from the member states of the international oil company. So does that mean that they want representatives from the United States, France, Italy, the United Kingdom, or Holland? Do they want government representatives, or do they want representatives from the companies themselves? So the devil will be in the detail. The federal government would most likely be very reluctant to allow other countries, and a wide range of countries, for example, to be sitting down on a negotiation on an internal security issue in Nigeria. If they wanted the international oil companies themselves to be represented, then again, that throws in a lot of complications, because the oil companies that will be negotiating from a purely commercial basis, their main effort will be the resumption of production and the guarantees of safety for their staff and for their facilities. The federal government's objective will be the restoration of law and order, as well as trying to end this conflict. So these things are not necessarily mutually exclusive, but they're also not necessarily gelling together. So it's a very interesting, kind of request, and the devil, as I said, is very much in the detail.
All right, Chidi, the militant group wants mediation to be done by independent mediators. What does this say to you as a security expert?
It says several things. It opens a very wide kind of door. It means, they want to make sure that they get international guarantees, so there's obviously a lack of trust between themselves and the federal government. So they want to make sure that whatever agreements they come to have international guarantors and international witnesses. It's also, again, as referring to my earlier comment of the devil being in the detail, it also opens up, another avenue in that if they're negotiating directly with the companies, it opens up opportunities for making sure that, maybe security contracts or, drilling contracts or logistic contracts, again, are ferried to certain people if that's their objective. And it's a very interesting kind of request. They didn't request, as a precondition, anything that the federal government would reject outright. For example, the release of the IPOB leader Nnamdi Kanu, or, the release of, pro-Biafra activists as has been in their previous request. It was these international mediators. So it opens up a whole new kind of dynamic, and it's how the federal government reacts that will set the stage for the next step.
All right, thank you, Chidi, for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you very much.
Now, according to Kenya's police, 6 politicians accused of hate speech have been arraigned in court today as they vow to tackle warmongers and inciters of all affiliations before elections next year. According to the head of Kenya's Directorate of Criminal Investigations, the politicians, who include members of the opposition Coalition for Reforms and Democracy, were either taken in or voluntarily attended police premises in the capital, Nairobi, to record statements after they were accused of using inflammatory language. President Uhuru Kenyatta, who teamed up with one-time rival Deputy President William Ruto to win power in 2013, will seek a second term in August 2017 elections. Former Premier Raila Odinga, who leads CORD, poses the biggest political challenge to President Kenyatta in next year's ballot. Well, staying in Kenya, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, has been meeting with Kenyan and Somali leaders to discuss the future of Somali refugees in Dadaab. Now, this comes after the Kenyan government announced it would be closing the facility which houses Somalis displaced by decades of conflict.
The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, met with Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta to discuss the future of Somali refugees in the Dadaab refugee camp in the capital, Nairobi. The visit comes as the Kenyan government says it wants to close the world's largest refugee camp, home to more than 350,000 refugees, most coming from Somalia. Kenya has hosted Somali refugees for more than 2 decades. In 2013, the Kenyan and Somali governments, along with the UNHCR, signed an agreement to help Somali refugees with voluntary returns. To date, more than 14,000 have gone back. The United Nations and Western states have warned against forcibly repatriating the 350,000 or so Somalis who still live in the sprawling Dadaab camp in northeast Kenya, saying it will violate international obligations. According to the government, the refugee camp poses an existential security threat to Kenya, arguing attacks including the Westgate Mall rampage in 2013 and the Garissa University massacre in 2015, which claimed hundreds of lives, were planned at Dadaab.
Still to come on Network Africa. TikTok goes the clock for the EgyptAir black boxes as investigators say they'll stop emitting signals by the 24th of this month.